focus on Planned Parenthood. A member of Congress tells us her plan to make the abortion provider repay funds it allegedly received in a coronavirus stimulus package. Fighting back, what the Attorney General is saying about charges he is too lenient toward the president. He also addresses the violent protests in some U.S. cities. Corruption claims, why the former Prime Minister of Malaysia is facing the prospect of spending years in jail. And moving forward, reaction to the settlement of a lawsuit filed by a student at a Catholic high school against the Washington Post. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, July 28th, 2020. Good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Donald Trump says anyone who targets federal buildings will go to prison for years. But some mayors who don't like federal agents coming to their town are calling on Congress to take action. Meanwhile, the president calls on Americans to protect the most vulnerable during this coronavirus pandemic. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, here at the White House, President Trump is not backing down on his calls for law and order, especially in Portland, where they've seen weeks now of unrest. And the president, again, he wants those lawbreakers in prison or else.
Night after night in Portland, demonstrators clash with law enforcement.
Come on, we're getting an ambulance. Go.
Federal agents are there to quell it, and President Donald Trump warns in a tweet anarchists, agitators, or protesters who vandalize or damage our federal courthouse in Portland or any federal buildings, minimum 10 years in prison. But some mayors don't want the feds anywhere near them, and now calling on Congress to make it illegal to send in militarized agents without permission. One Democrat says the president is just trying to appear tough.
Fascist leaders and those who would be dictators pursue trying to scare the populace into thinking that they are under some mob assault.
Meanwhile, the pandemic. In Queens, New York, people who lost their jobs in restaurants or construction waiting in line for food.
It's going to be a long struggle.
The president urged Americans Monday to protect the most vulnerable.
We also strongly urge citizens to take extra precautions to shield those at highest risk, which are, in most cases, in many cases, the elderly, especially the elderly with medical problems such as heart or diabetes.
And he emphasized vigilance, speaking directly at young people.
This stage of the pandemic is being fueled by younger Americans who generally have little risk of being seriously harmed by the disease, but can spread the disease.
Also, one major school union is telling its employees, more than 1 million of them, school teachers, that they can go on strike if they don't feel that schools will be safe to reopen this fall. And by the way, President Trump, as you know, has been adamant about kids getting back into the classroom. Tracy?
Okay, thank you so much, Owen. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reporting for us tonight. Well, the Hyde Amendment is in jeopardy on Capitol Hill. Democratic lawmakers are calling for the repeal of the pro-life amendment that prevents taxpayer dollars from funding abortions. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales is following these developments. Eric.
Well, Tracy, at one time, lawmakers of both parties supported the Hyde Amendment, but that all changed once Democrats took control of the House in the 2018 midterms. Now they're working to repeal it, and that's not all. Members of the self-described pro-choice caucus have now added an amendment to an appropriations bill that would basically strip away all of Hyde's protections.
Hyde's days are numbered.
A brief amendment by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts aims to eliminate the decades-old Hyde protections. She writes, quote, "This abortion coverage ban disproportionately harms low-income people and people of color and targets those who receive Medicaid coverage. The Hyde Amendment prohibits federal dollars, like those funding Medicaid, from being used to pay for abortions. Pro-lifers say it saves hundreds of thousands of lives each year."
The Hyde Amendment says no federal funds should go towards abortions, and the majority of Americans support that.
Republican Debbie Lesko of Arizona tells me Democrats are increasing their support for abortion.
I think your listeners need to understand the clear difference. Republicans and President Trump are trying to protect the lives of innocent babies. And unfortunately, my Democratic colleagues don't believe in that.
Pro-abortion Illinois Democrat Maureen Newman was able to defeat incumbent pro-life Congressman Dan Lipinski in a March primary. Representative Lipinski was the last House Democrat to be pro-life. The Democratic candidate for president, Catholic Joe Biden, who himself once supported the Hyde Amendment, reversed that position in June 2019.
If I believe health care is a right, as I do, I can no longer support an amendment that makes that right dependent on someone's zip code.
This puts the former vice president in sync with the 2016 Democratic platform, which calls for the end of Hyde. Most Democrats say abortion access is a human rights issue, but pro-life Americans say all they're trying to do is protect the life of babies, which is what God wants us to do. Tracy?
Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Thank you, Eric. And coming up later in the show, we talk to Kristen Day, head of Democrats for Life of America. Attorney General William Barr testified today before the House Judiciary Committee.
I'm supposedly punishing the president's enemies and helping his friends. What enemies have I indicted? Who could you point to one indictment that has been under the department that you feel is unmerited?
Democratic Chairman Jerry Nadler accused the Attorney General of acting to, quote, secure favors for the president. Attorney General Barr pushed for a more lenient sentence for Roger Stone, an ally of President Trump. The AG testified that he did not discuss that sentencing recommendation with anyone at the White House. Lawmakers and the public are paying respects to the late Congressman John Lewis. The vice president and Jill Biden paid respects last night. And earlier today, the vice president and Second Lady Karen Pence also paid respects. Today's public viewing is taking place outside as a safety precaution during the coronavirus pandemic. Representative Lewis was the first African-American lawmaker to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda yesterday. It is a tribute reserved for the most distinguished government officials and military officers. Lying in honor is for private citizens. Officer Jacob Chestnut Jr., a Capitol police officer killed in the line of duty, was the first African-American to receive that honor in 1998. The body of civil rights icon Rosa Parks laid in honor in the Rotunda after she died in 2005. She was also the first woman to receive the honor. Last year, the late Representative Elijah Cummings was the first African-American lawmaker to lie in state at the Capitol when his body was laying in state, not in the Rotunda, but in Statuary Hall. Senate Republicans have released their proposal for the next COVID-19 relief bill.
Every bill has to start somewhere. The Republicans are in the majority in the Senate. This is the starting place.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, together with top Senate Republicans, unveiled their plan Monday evening. It includes more money for virus testing, $15 billion for child care centers, and benefits for businesses, including a new round of loans under the Paycheck Protection Program. Democrats say it does not come close enough to the $3 trillion HEROES Act that the House passed back in May.
We're going to roll up our sleeves. We want to get things done, but they have to come a ways to solve the real problems of this country.
On the Senate floor this morning, Democratic leader Chuck Schumer held up the front page of the New York Daily News with the headline, "Let them eat cake." He said those words sum up Americans' reaction to the Republicans' plan. The GOP leader said the week is young and reiterated bipartisan support will be needed for another aid bill to pass in the Senate. The head of China's Center for Disease Control and Prevention says that he has been injected with an experimental coronavirus vaccine. He hopes it will show the public it is safe and says people should follow suit once it is approved. Beijing is competing with the U.S. and Britain to be the first to find an approved vaccine. Iran threatens the U.S. by firing a missile at a mock aircraft carrier as tensions remain high. The general in charge of Iran's Revolutionary Guard gave the order earlier today to start exercise Great Prophet 14. A helicopter fired a missile at a replica of an American carrier in the Strait of Hormuz, and Iranian commandos rappelled onto the deck. A court in Malaysia sentences a former prime minister to 12 years in prison for corruption, and he promises to appeal.
This is definitely not the end of the world, because there's a process of appeal, and we hope that we would be successful then.
Najib Razak was found guilty of looting a state investment fund in 2009. He set up a fund to help with economic development, but U.S. investigators allege more than $4 billion was stolen and laundered to finance hotels, luxury jewelry, and Hollywood films. The 67-year-old is urging his supporters to continue backing him. The Prime Minister of Israel says the Hezbollah militant group is, quote, playing with fire after terrorists tried to launch an attack from neighboring Lebanon yesterday. Appearing with the Israeli Defense Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu said the Israeli army stopped the attack. It set off heavy fighting along the border with Lebanon. It was in an area known as Chabah Farms, and it was much quieter today with Israeli tanks patrolling the Golan Heights. Hezbollah is denying that its fighters were involved. A bishop in India who is accused of rape is asking the country's Supreme Court to intervene in the case. Bishop Franco Mulakul claims that he's falsely accused and says the claims are because he questioned alleged financial irregularities at the nun's convent. A nun with the Missionaries of Jesus says that he sexually abused her over a dozen times. He tested positive for COVID-19 earlier this month and was showing symptoms. Rome's Pontifical Universities say they will hold in-person classes starting this fall. The Vatican's education department encouraged the schools to ensure that teaching be delivered in an ordinary manner. They will be required to follow all health and safety measures indicated by local authorities. Government officials are allowing students from other countries to enter Italy to resume classes. Joining us now from Rome is Sister Catherine Joseph Droste, Dean of Theology at the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas, also known as the Angelicum University. Sister, welcome back to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you, Tracy. Wonderful to be here with you.
Well, we spoke a week after Italy went into lockdown when you had to switch everything to virtual learning. How did that go?
That seems a long time ago right now, I would have to say. Overall, it went pretty well. We're now in July, and I can say that we finished the semester. The students are all back home or wherever they are situated, and professors have finished and taking a break. So it was a great challenge for all involved, and I think we all learned a great deal. But I think we're all very grateful for what we did learn as well, on all levels, not just academically.
So what are your plans for in-person classes for the fall? What does that entail?
For the fall, we're looking at having a great group of students and a great group of professors again, because that's what it took to get through this spring with all of the challenges that are involved. And for the fall, we know that there are a lot of questions regarding the whole coronavirus, the situation in the world, the situation in Italy, the situation here in Rome, the situation specifically with pontifical universities, the situation with our students around the world, those here in Rome, those trying to get back. There are so many questions, as we know, with everything surrounding COVID. The questions are bigger than the answers. We have more questions than we have answers right now. But our goal is to continue teaching, beginning in the aulas. I know there's the whole threat, the whole question of will there be another wave. We have to move forward, and we're moving forward, planning for classes in the aula, but also knowing that we will most likely have students who will not be able to be present here in Rome. Therefore, we have to plan technologically of how will we continue to teach not only those students who are here in Rome or here in Europe and able to arrive in Rome for the fall semester, but also those who are around the world who wish to continue their courses of study or to begin new courses of study. So it's a great challenge, but we have to move forward, we have to plan, but we also have to be ready for so many contingencies that we just don't know right now.
Yeah, Absolutely. And that was going to be my last question. You really kind of touched on it, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. You know, how do you think the pandemic is going to impact education, especially Catholic education, going forward?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to even, you know, how did this semester go? So to kind of expand upon that a little bit, and what did we learn? I think one of the terms, two terms come to mind: patience and gratitude. Patience, because patience is a virtue about suffering and difficulty, and the difficulties were there, and the difficulties will still be there. And I think we learned what education is, and not to take it for granted, on the part of students, on the part of professors, on the part of administrators. What is this thing called learning? How does it happen? We kind of became so accustomed to, you know, you just walk into a classroom, you teach, the students are there. And this COVID virus, this experience of the past, and as we look forward, it's challenging us to look at what is education and how can we do it in different ways.
Well, Sister, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights with us, and also what you do. I know there's more questions and answers, but I'm sure we'll be talking to you again in the future, and thank you again.
Tracy, thank you very much. God bless.
Coming up, why a group of pro-life Democrats requested changes to the party's platform. A federal judge has blocked a Tennessee law that would ban abortion in most circumstances. The judge says in his ruling the measure cannot take effect while it is being challenged in court. He also says it is likely portions of the proposal will be found unconstitutional. And for more on this story, including the specifics of the pro-life bill, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. Well, with just about 3 weeks until the Democratic National Convention, pro-life Democrats are increasing calls for party leaders to remove extreme abortion policies from the party's platform. In a tweet, Democrats for Life of America Executive Director Kristen warns if the Democratic platform does not move away from abortion extremism, the polls could prove wrong like they were in 2016. Dems must moderate on abortion to win. Kristen Day joins me now to talk more about this. Kristen, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
All right, so we are less than 100 days until the presidential election. How vital do you think it is for the Democratic Party to recognize the importance of pro-life Democrats within the party?
It is so important to recognize the 21 million pro-life Democrats who believe that life in the womb is worth protecting. I was talking to some Wisconsin voters today, and they said, one of them said when she saw what was in the platform, she said she didn't think that she could vote for Joe Biden.
I know that you sent a letter last week with signatures from about 100 faith leaders adding their voices to your call to the party to reform its platform. Have you heard from any party leaders? And if so, what have those discussions been like?
We have not heard from any party leaders to date. We have heard from more faith leaders around the country who want to join the letter and want to have their voice heard as well. So we have been getting extremely good response from people and voters around the country who agree with us.
And I know you're in favor of finding, quote, common ground language on abortion for the party's platform. What does that common ground, what does that look like? And what would you like to see the Democratic Party do to attract and hold on to pro-life Democrats?
Well, I would like to see some common ground language that says we support pregnant women, we support children, and we want to do everything we can to make sure that a woman doesn't seek abortion or feel like abortion is their only choice. Right now we're going the opposite extreme when we add language to codify Roe, which is supported by less than Democrats around the country.
As you know, there are currently efforts on Capitol Hill led by Democrats to strike the pro-life Hyde amendment from a federal spending bill. What's your reaction to that?
It's so disappointing to see Democrats try to eliminate Hyde. It was bipartisan legislation that has been supported by both Republicans and Democrats for decades. A majority of the population does not support taxpayer funding of abortion. A majority of Democrats do not support taxpayer funding of abortion. This extreme tactics that they're taking is really alienating voters, and it's going to affect elections.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Kristen Day, Executive Director of Democrats for Life of America. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Following the settlement of his lawsuit against the Washington Post, Nicholas Sandmann is thanking his supporters and vowing to continue to hold the media accountable. In a tweet, the Covington Catholic High School alum writes, "We have settled with WAPO and CNN. The fight isn't over. 2 down, 6 to go." Joining me now to talk more about this is Andrea Pachani-Bear, National Catholic Register contributor and legal analyst. Andrea, welcome back to the show. So good to see you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Tracy.
So, Andrea, what message do you think Nick Sandmann's settlement sends, or hopefully sends?
You know, this young man has sent us very important messages since the very beginning of his being thrust into the national spotlight. The first message is never jump to conclusions. And I thought that the press would have learned that early on and have been trained to not jump to conclusions and get to the facts. But it took his courage in order for them to understand. But the second agreement here, second lesson to be taught is keep your promises. And the media who have come to settlement agreements with the Sandmann family and with Nicholas have agreed to keep the terms of their settlement agreement confidential. And some of the media personalities attached to these outlets haven't done so. So I'm really hoping that they're going to learn a lesson from a very brave young man.
It seems that Nick isn't backing down either. There are still lawsuits pending against 6 other media outlets. What do you think that says about his courage to speak the truth?
You know, I think it's a really important lesson right now that we're learning from young people, that stand with your convictions. He knew what the truth was. He knew that he was there trying to de-escalate a very tense situation, and to stay with it. Never be bullied, and never back down for what you know to be the truth, and especially the truth about respect for life and our importance of our really being still steadfast in our understanding of what truth is.
Absolutely. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for your time today and for your analysis. We always appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Tracy.
And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.